Jordan Chariton is here. Now, Jordan Chariton is from the Status Coup. He's a friend of the show. He's got a great show called The Status Coup. And he's here with us right now. Hey, Jordan, how are you?
Hey, Jimmy. Thanks for having me.
So now you're in Detroit, and you noticed. You tell me what you noticed, and then I'll show the video.
Sure. So CNN, to continue the CNN suck theme, they denied me credentials to get into the debate, to go into the spin room and interview people after and all that business. So we had access to the parking lot, and which was delightful. So essentially, they allowed us into the parking lot. So we had basically access to where the candidates' supporters were. They call it the visibility zone. And it's basically when CNN cuts to commercial, goes out of commercial, they zoom in on the candidate supporters, waving signs and all that. So if you watch CNN yesterday, it looked like Elizabeth Warren has this force, all Warren signs, and you barely saw any Bernie Sanders supporters. And what I learned later, when multiple Bernie Sanders supporters approached me, was the police were literally blocking Bernie Sanders supporters from entering this area where candidate supporters wave their signs. Police were allowing Elizabeth Warren supporters to freely enter, Joe Biden supporters to freely enter, Marianne Williamson supporters to freely enter. And when Bernie Sanders supporters tried to come in wearing their Bernie shirts with signs, they were told they can't enter. In many cases, I was told they were sent on wild goose chases. Go to that corner, which was barricaded. Several people were told you can't bring in signs that large, but they allowed Elizabeth Warren's supporters to bring in mega signs. So in addition to blocking Bernie Sanders supporters from coming in, the Bernie Sanders supporters that were there, if you look at the footage, which we went through, CNN's camera was very obviously panning. They're zooming in on Warren supporters with the big signs that they allowed Warren supporters to come in with. Then they're showing the 3 Biden supporters, because there were literally like 3 or 4 Biden supporters. And then in the corner, you see like 1 or 2 Bernie signs, and they zoom out right away and show this mega CNN logo. They basically parked the Bernie supporters behind a CNN logo so you couldn't see them. So the footage clearly shows it.
So you watch the footage here. I'll show the people at home so they can watch this footage.
In America, for Americans. Yesterday, she came out with a trick.
So there's the big Warren signs. There's another big Warren sign. Warren. All I see is Warren signs. Now it starts to pull out. And so the Bernie people would be over here. But how come I don't see any Bernie? Wow, that's amazing. That is kind of stunning. Oh, the Bernie people are behind the CNN thing. So the Bernie people are back there. That's what they really did. That's kind of amazing. That's kind of Go ahead.
What's incredible about it, there was a Green New Deal march with a lot of these Sunrise Movement people, Ocasio-Cortez supporters, but the majority of them were Bernie supporters. Ty, my cameraman and producer, covered it. And they were marching down to try and get into this zone. So the Bernie supporters far outweighed the Warren supporters, but literally the police were letting in every supporters of every other candidate but Bernie. And when Bernie supporters that I spoke to told me that when they pushed back against police saying, no, we were told by the campaign to come, look, I have the email, they were told, take it up with CNN, meaning the cops were following what CNN was telling them. And this isn't surprising to me because in Miami, for the first Democratic debate, I was down there. Again, they didn't approve us for credentials, but a security guard came up to me because they weren't letting me go in and interview any of these supporters. And he thought I was mad at him. So he came up to me off camera and said, he was very apologetic. He said, hey, sorry, I'm just following what, the party told me, the DNC, not to let, I don't know if it was just me or other journalists in. So basically they have these human beings, Biden supporters, Buttigieg supporters, this was in Miami, as standing props and mannequins, but they won't let you go interview them. In 2016, I was able to interview them. So the security guard was telling me it was the network and the DNC instructing them, don't let any journalists in to talk to these people. And yesterday, the Bernie supporters, when they asked the police, why are all these other people allowed in with their huge signs and their shirts? We're not. They said, take it up with CNN. And this is not surprising because if you watched CNN yesterday, it was an alternate reality. They kept saying that Warren has surpassed Bernie in the polls, which is not factually correct. It's not factually correct.
They were saying that on CNN?
Yes, they took one poll that shows Warren has been rising among very liberal voters and showed Bernie has been kind of flat, not telling the audience that very liberal voters are, generally speaking, traditional Democratic Party voters, specifically older voters. That's how those kinds of voters are classified in these polls. But they use that one poll to basically make it seem like Bernie's lost his mojo, Bernie has fallen behind Warren. And I tweeted this out literally yesterday. 3 polls came out, 3 different polls with Bernie in a very solid second place. And CNN is putting this stuff out there that Warren has surpassed Bernie. And I think if you look at the footage, it goes a little bit beyond just kind of like CNN PR. What they're doing is kind of what political campaigns do, showing what you want to do, showing what you want to accentuate, blocking out what you don't. I mean, when they're CNN, we were there in the parking lot because they gave us credentials to Media Row in the parking lot, which was useless for us. But it's like an occupying force. They've taken control of this whole area outside of Detroit's Comerica Park, and they intentionally they said this is where the Warren supporters go. This is where Williamson's people. This is where Biden's 2 people go, and Bernie people, as you saw, were behind the CNN logo. So I don't know how any objective person, whether you're Bernie supporter, Warren supporter, neither, can look at that and think this network is giving Bernie Sanders a fair shot. And you already covered. I mean, Jake Tapper was literally doing talking points where he's put, it's this narrative, and MSNBC did it in the first question to Bernie too. You're going to raise taxes on the middle class. Of course, there's zero context that overall costs will go down. So to me, CNN revealed itself as, the corporate public relations propaganda stooge that they are. But these are the kind of stories that happen at the Philadelphia DNC, where Bernie Sanders delegates were kicked out and basically treated like the scum at the bottom of your shoe. And these are the kinds of things happening that aren't getting any news coverage. The subtle and not so subtle blocking of Bernie Sanders supporters that the DNC and the news networks, they're going to come later if Biden is the nominee and say, well, why won't those Bernie people come home to the Democratic Party? Maybe because of shit like this.
I have one more video to show you. Here's one more example of what we're talking about. So now there's people with Biden signs, so you can see them and you can see Warren. But you see that little Bernie sign all the way in the back here? Mm-hmm. So they weren't even Jordan, they weren't allowing Bernie supporters to have bigger signs. Is that correct?
Yeah, the Warren supporters, as you saw, were allowed, I think 5x4 posters, and Bernie supporters weren't allowed to bring in their own signs. I guess they were provided signs.
Really? And
Biden supporters had bigger signs. Bernie supporters were not allowed to come in with Bernie shirts. I mean, it's so transparently corrupt that, you almost want to throw up your hands and laugh because we're not surprised, but they're not even hiding it at this point. And I will tell you, Bernie Sanders' campaign didn't respond to me on the record. I think they were busy today, obviously. Somebody said, we took notice of this. So Bernie's campaign was seeing it too. Somebody on Bernie's campaign said that to me, that we noticed. But I mean, we've seen this for weeks, that they're propping up Warren. They're making it seem like, Warren has a plan for everything where, I like some of her plans, but in reality, a lot of her plans are recycled plans by Bernie Sanders that he's had for 20 years with a couple more paragraphs, So she's not reinventing the wheel, but that is the narrative that you have seen from CNN, definitely MSNBC. But in this case, why this is so dangerous, not just because, you're not a news outlet at this point, you're a propaganda arm. This is no different than what you'd expect from Fox News. But why this is dangerous is this is what is called an information war. It's no different than 2016, them throwing up the superdelegates on screen along with the pledge delegates to make it seem like Bernie's just totally behind. He has no shot. Well, when you're showing this and it looks like Elizabeth Warren has all the momentum and all the mojo, and Bernie, look at that one sign in the corner, it has the potential of steeping into some persuadable voters that are watching CNN to be like, oh, well, Bernie has no chance. So that's what CNN is pushing. And I spoke with at least 5 or 6 Bernie supporters today, and they're saying basically like this is 2016 all over again. It's no different, and we know how this ends. I would say that is dramatic, but I can't because I was in Miami and I saw what they were doing, where they were not letting journalists speak to Bernie Sanders supporters or any of the supporters. And frankly, I mean, listen, Jimmy, I'm all for young journalists. They gave media credentials to a 10-year-old last night to interview Marianne Williamson and denied us credentials.
No, they don't have to.
10-year-old, very cute, but give me a fucking break.
So they don't they don't have to give you a real reason, right?
Space constraints.
Space constraints, right? So they can't let everybody in. We have to just let in some people who we think are important, and so they do not let you in.
10-year-olds to ask Marianne Williamson about her favorite pet. No offense to Marianne Williamson, I think she did a great job. But I'm not going to knock anyone. But there are journalists that have far less of a following than Status Coup. They're being accepted in. You said in Miami, there was enough space you could go golfing and it wouldn't hit anyone in that building. So it's all BS. I take it as a badge of honor because obviously that means that they know who we are and don't want adversarial journalists in there. But it's unfortunate, Status Coup, and I know Jimmy Dore's show is not built on like access to the powerful. That's not why people watch us.
That would be the opposite. That would be the last thing this show's about: access to the powerful.
Right. But, at a certain point, isn't it good for the Democratic Party to have journalists challenge these politicians? Because if they do become the nominee, you don't think the Republicans are waiting with a 2x4 to ask Joe Biden, what did you mean when you told Wall Street, I'll fluff your pillows for 8 years? What did you mean when you called black people, those people in the 1990s, I don't want them near my mother with the crime bill? I mean, the ads write themselves. So, yes. Totally shield all your corporate candidates, including for the people Kamala Harris. No questioning. Ask them fluffy questions. I'm sure we'll get more of that tonight. And when you have Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren on stage, go after Bernie hard. And then every other question you ask the corporate candidates is basically to have them attack Bernie.
Yes.
I mean, this is, yes, Fox News is more racist and all that. But there's no difference right now when you're watching CNN and MSNBC from what Fox News did in the Obama years. I mean, it's very obvious, it's very deliberate, and it's unethical. And it's not surprising to your audience or my audience, but somebody's got to call it out, and that's why we're on the ground. I mean, these trips are expensive. We're grassroots. We're growing from the ground up, Status Coup. But I want to show what's being done because, honestly, if progressives expect a different result, if they're not going to stand up, and I'm not calling for anything violent, but I think some people need to start, knocking on CNN's door in New York and DC or MSNBC, because the media, we could talk about voter purges, we could talk about sending out dishonest mailers, we could talk about, closing down polling stations. All of this is part of the equation with election fraud and voter suppression. But at the end of the day, there's a 24/7 media rigging going on, and if that continues, I mean, forget Bernie, forget Tulsi. I don't personally support Warren, but even her. I mean, trust me, they're going to prop up Warren just to knock Bernie out, and then they'll turn on Warren. I mean, this is an obvious playbook.
So you think that's what's happening with Warren right now? You think that they're propping her up to undercut Bernie's support, and then once they sufficiently screw Bernie in that way, they'll turn on her? You think they'll turn on her?
I think they'll turn on her if Joe Biden or Kamala Harris is still viable. Absolutely. I think that Elizabeth Warren is very flexible, is a generous way of saying it on policy. She's already shown that she is very, very happy to make deals with the establishment. She was already in 2015 angling to become Hillary Clinton's vice president. We saw that in the WikiLeaks emails. They were trying to set up meetings and this and that. So I don't trust Elizabeth Warren to fight for the things she's proposing as much as Bernie Sanders. I also think she's got a little Obama in her that right out of the gate, she'll be compromising halfway, 75% to the Republicans. However, I do think if once they neutralize Bernie, between Harris and Biden, I mean, who are basically, do you know Kamala Harris did a fundraiser at a Citigroup executive's penthouse in Fifth Avenue and took paw prints with her dog. Talk about for the people. So yeah, I think they're intentionally propping up Warren. If they're successful in knocking Bernie out, I think they're going to go. I think honestly, if Biden has a bad performance tonight, all that Wall Street money, all that special interest money is going to funnel very fast to Kamala Harris because that's what they want. And they also, if we're being honest, Kamala Harris is the safest candidate for the corporate Democratic establishment because any criticism of her, journalistically, politically, whatever, sexism, racism, all that jazz. So that's what I think is happening. But I got to tell you, I mean, I feel it as a journalist when I see that, they're intentionally, both MSNBC, CNN, creating a dynamic at these debates where it's all corporate journalists. There's some independent outlets allowed in that, aren't exactly challenging anyone the way we would. They're basically setting up a cocoon around the corporate candidates to make sure there is no adversarial journalism. And it was almost like they were laughing at us. They gave us a media credential to go stand in the parking lot. So whatever, I mean, we go forward. But what is going on is, the bottom line is this is not democracy. Let's not pretend that the DNC doesn't play an invisible hand in this. I don't think the networks are just doing this without any communication with the DNC. The DNC just had a meeting here in the hotel I'm in the other day. So the DNC is very active here. I saw, Mr. Lead with Your Values, Tom Perez, this morning. I tried to get an interview. He sprinted as fast as possible to his car. So, but yeah, I think progressives need to stand up, whether you're a Bernie supporter, Tulsi, Warren, whoever you support, because they are manufacturing not just consent, but they're manufacturing discontent against Bernie, even though every single one of his policies not only has majority support among Democrats, independents, a lot of policies he has majority support among Republicans, which Jake Tapper failed to mention, surprisingly.
I mean, it was kind of shocking to watch how they just kept saying over and over that, this isn't popular with the country. The country doesn't want this stuff. It's like everything they're talking. Trump voters are for single-payer health care. Trump voters are for taxing millionaires and billionaires. What are you talking about? This is the country's for it. Of course, Jake Tapper and the rest of the crew are all millionaires. They're all in the 1%, and they don't go outside of the bubble, so the Beltway. So all they know is that. That's what they think. They think that everybody in the Midwest is a knucklehead who doesn't want to vote for single-payer health care and taxing millionaires. They do. Milwaukee elected a socialist mayor 3 times. So this idea that somehow the Midwest are a bunch of lunkheads who are afraid of progressive ideas is a bunch of bull.
Well, it's also, I mean, I asked some supporters of Bernie this tonight. And by the way, I'm going to a Joe Biden debate watch party tonight.
That's going to be brutal. That's going to be brutal.
That should be exciting. I'm bringing my bingo card.
You should bring some crying towels because there are going to be some disappointed people.
Yes. But what I find so amazing about this whole thing is, if the Midwest, Rust Belt, wanted moderate candidates so badly, why is Hillary Clinton not the president?
That's exactly every time they said that we can't go too far left. We did this already. We did a centrist. We did a centrist who wasn't promising them Medicare for all, and she got her ass kicked. She lost. That's why we have Donald Trump. Why do they keep pretending like we didn't already throw a centrist at Donald Trump? We already did that.
Right. And also, by the way, I mean, they're talking about it like Trump is to get those Trump conservative voters. Trump ran on a progressive platform.
That's right.
He was full of shit. I was at the rallies. We're going to end the wars. I'm not bad thing to say as a Republican, but everybody's going to be covered. Universal health care. We're repealing NAFTA. I'm taking it to Goldman Sachs and all of them. They loved it.
They loved it.
Who wouldn't want to vote for that?
They loved it.
Even though the media tried to paint Tulsi Gabbard as like a MAGA, beloved by MAGA after her breakout performance in the first debate, yeah, a lot of MAGA supporters liked her because they liked when Trump was saying, I'm going to end the wars. The media won't tell you that Trump has sent 2,000 troops to the Middle East in the last 2 months to fight Iran. They're leaving that out when they asked Bernie yesterday, how are you different than what Trump's saying? Trump hasn't ended the wars. He's just doing it where you don't see it. He's doubled, tripled down on Obama's drone war. He's bombing the 8 or 9 countries we're still bombing. Venezuela, Iran, they're obviously trying to topple. So, Trump's not a pacifist or a dove, but that's how they're trying to make it seem. But what's amazing to me is all these people in the Midwest voted for Trump, A, because they were in an anti-establishment mood. That hasn't changed. B, because he was giving them a lot of phony baloney, but it was progressive phony baloney. And C, if you look at the exit polls, which I actually read them, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, it wasn't Putin, it wasn't Comey. Top issues in the 2016 debate in these states: trade, NAFTA, immigration. Do you know who pushed NAFTA? Joe Biden. But do you know who, as recently in 2016, was writing op-eds how we have to push the TPP? Joe Biden. Do you know who has not given an answer yet? If as president, he will push through the TPP, which will be the final nail in the deindustrialized Midwest's coffin? Joe Biden. So this is the guy who's going to take back Michigan. I know what the polls say now, but a lot of those polls, if you actually read them, which none of these, this idiot, Harry Enton, the forecaster, they don't read the polls. The majority polled, over half say they're not familiar with Joe Biden's Senate record. You wait. Obviously this will be up on the internet. Wait till Donald Trump starts calling him NAFTA Joe. Wait till Donald Trump starts calling him TPP Joe. And by the way, I got to be honest with you. I'm saying this not as a journalist, but just watching. Joe Biden looks unwell. If you watch him, and I watched him, I covered his foreign policy speech 2 weeks ago in New York. He doesn't look well. I'm not saying there's something medically wrong, but he looks tired. We get alerts. My partner Jen and I get alerts every day what the Biden campaign is doing. Almost every day, Joe Biden is meeting with his advisors. He's barely on the campaign trail. I think
that they figured out, just like Hillary Clinton figured out, that the more Hillary Clinton campaigned, the more her numbers go down. That was a fact. And every time she ran for office, she started off high, and no matter how much more she campaigned, her numbers always went down. She was never able to get her numbers up, which is why people are like, why is she campaigning in Texas? Why is she campaigning in Arizona? Why isn't she because they said, oh, she wants to really run up the numbers. They knew that if she campaigned in Wisconsin, that actually her numbers would go down. They knew she was in trouble in Wisconsin, but they knew if she went there to campaign, it would make it worse, because she was that repulsive to the average voter. And the same thing with Joe Biden. The more he campaigns, the more his numbers go down. And so that they're just trying to run the clock out. That's why he's not doing campaign events. When he does a campaign event, he opens his mouth and sticks his foot right in it every goddamn time. He cannot help himself. So and he looks not all there. So whatever that means, he looks not all there.
I completely agree. And I think that, another thing the corporate media, CNN, leaves out, Bernie won the Michigan primary. Bernie won the Wisconsin primary. So he won 2 out of 3. You need Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin to win back the White House. Honestly, I think Bernie Sanders possibly could win Iowa in a general election.
I agree.
Bernie Sanders possibly could compete in Kentucky. Bernie Sanders can compete in
Ohio.
Some of these red states. So this is basically, call it what you want. I think it's beyond manufacturing consent. I think CNN is trying to, you want to talk about Kellyanne Conway and alternative facts. This is an alternate reality. As our story, by the way, the story is on statuscoup.com if you want to read it, about them blocking Bernie supporters from coming in and basically turning the camera away from them. But what's really going on is they're trying to shut out numbers. There were 200 Bernie Sanders supporters last night that could not get into this section that were trying to get in to hold up signs. And we'll see on 6-7 months from now. I think Bernie has the advantage. He's got over 1 million volunteers, but unfortunately, television news, the print media is still influential. And if they keep getting away with it's one thing if you're going to just have more Biden people on your air, have more Harris people on your air. But if you're essentially going to put out lies, I saw MSNBC last week show a poll that showed Warren and Bernie tied. I think it was in New Hampshire. And they just said, oh, Elizabeth Warren is taking the lead with the poll right in front of them. So I think people, I'm not telling people what to do, but the DNC is not your only enemy. CNN, I don't mean enemy like be like Trump, and we're not talking about violence or anything. But what I am saying is, in terms of getting the progressive message out there, in terms of getting the context, the facts, the fact that Bernie has won in every poll head to head against Trump, the fact that Bernie Sanders has, by the way, Bernie Sanders has had a record $2 million donations so far in just 5 months, never discussed on CNN. So I think if 2016 was the opening, I think that was child's play compared to what they're all doing now. And people need to be, organizing not just to canvass, but to kind of non-violently fight back against CNN, MSNBC, because if they're allowed to keep doing this, yesterday it was Warren, the next debate, maybe they'll be propping up, Pete and shutting out Bernie voters. But they're just going to change. First it was Harris, then they moved to Beto. Beto didn't catch on. Then they moved to Biden. Then they moved back to Harris. Now they're trying to move back to Biden. It's anybody but Bernie. And this is kind of, to me, that's why Status Coup exists. I know that's why Jimmy Dore exists, because people need to know the truth. You can't make informed decisions if you don't have the numbers, if you don't have the facts, if you don't have the real context. Like, I'm telling you, if we weren't here, nobody else is going to report what was going on there. Nobody else is going to talk to the Bernie supporters to see that they're being shut out, the fact that they're being sent on wild goose chase to three corners in boiling hot Detroit, the fact that when they ask police, why are you letting in Warren supporters? No problem. The police are saying, take it up with CNN. The police are basically saying, we're doing what CNN told us to do. This is scandalous in a healthy news environment, but unfortunately, a healthy news environment means a YouTube comedian is a premier journalist. So
that's exactly what it means. You're right. Next live Jimmy Dore show, August 2nd in Burbank, California. Then we go to Denver, San Francisco, Baltimore, Seattle, and Honolulu for Christmas. Go to jimmydorecomedy.com for a link for all tickets and become a patron or a premium member. We give you tons of bonus material and lots more. Go to jimmydorecomedy.com. Sign up. Become a member. Couldn't do it without your support.